College is a wild ride for young adults, and their mental health often suffers. This podcast addresses the inner battles many college students struggle with. You're listening to Normalize It Forward, where we have raw, unfiltered conversations about young people's biggest mental health problems, how to handle them, and how to achieve a more resilient mind. Time to get rid of those heavy burdens and focus more on self-love and care. Here is your host, Mark Lehman.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Normalize It Forward, the podcast that talks openly about mental health and wellness. Today, we are joined by Greg Hudnall of Hope Squad. Greg, welcome to the program today.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. So just a bit about your background. Greg is the Chief Executive Officer at Hope Squad. By background, he spent a decade in corporate America at Kroger Company and Johnson & Johnson in process improvement, marketing, and sales. Greg firmly believes that good personal mental health habits, active listening, and reaching out to trusted peers have the ability to save lives. When he's not at work, he enjoys hiking, exercise, and reading. Fun fact, he's climbed 15 of Colorado's 58 Fort Nears. He's been to 5 continents and lived in 4 different countries. His next bucket list item is Mount Kilimanjaro. Awesome. Greg, welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks, Mark. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, let's start off. Tell us a little bit about Hope Squad.
Hope Squad is a company. We say that we exist in order to foster human connection, community, and hope. And so we really exist in order to help in that connection. We believe connections at the power of changing lives. And so we exist as an organization. We work within a couple thousand schools across the country, and we help implement, we call the Hope Squad model, the Hope Squad way, which is taking the peers that are nominated by their peers inside of a school, putting them together with some certified advisors, certified adults that Hope Squad certifies, and then having them work week after week and month after month of a school year in order to help exactly what your podcast says is normalize the conversation around mental health, and then be that active listening ear for their peers. Notice dysregulation or notice things that perhaps are a little out of the ordinary, and to put their arm around their friends and their peers and say, can we talk, right? Is something going on in your life? What can I do to help?
Fantastic. What a great concept. I love it. Having worked in the schools my whole career, both private and public at varying levels, what a great concept to bring to a school system and help kids understand mental health, but really help them understand their role around their peers. That's fantastic, Greg. Really, really awesome. How long have you been with the company?
Been with Hope Squad full time for about 1.5 years.
Okay. And so I couldn't help but notice you made a bit of a jump from corporate America to Hope Squad. I guess I'm wondering what's behind that.
Yeah, so Hope Squad started as an idea by my dad about 20 years ago when my dad was in public education. He worked in public education for 30 years. He was a high school principal, and then he worked at the district office, and he lost a couple of students to suicide, death by suicide as a high school principal, and recognized the opportunity that the school system could and should do more. And when he was at the district office, he really set about making a change and trained as many adults in the school system and in the community that he could, and it didn't impact their death by suicides. And so they realized something needed to be different. Something needed to change. And that something was really focusing on the peer-to-peer component, that peer-to-peer power. We know that kids are more likely to talk to a peer than they are to an adult. That is what they're hardwired to do at those ages, especially middle school and high school. And so as they do so, we want to make sure that the kids they're talking to are the ones that are empowered, the ones that are knowledgeable. They have the tools and resources in order to do so. So that's what my dad said about trying to do 20 years ago and worked on that. And he retired from the school district, continued to work on that inside of Utah, set up an organization, Hope Squad, in order to help take that to the country and to the world. And so I was ancillarily involved prior to joining full time, and my dad has since retired and now provided the opportunity in order to help take this to thousands of more schools across the country.
What a fantastic concept. I want to just back out for a minute and update parents listening, because I wonder sometimes, as a therapist, and you're in the mental health space, Greg, we might take for granted that parents realize how bad of an issue this really is. So I just want to throw out a few statistics to illustrate it. First of all, I work with young adults, mostly high school and college aged. And in that age bracket, suicide is now the second leading cause of death. And just to give parents a sense, that has climbed from number 12 10 years ago to now number 2. And anxiety and depressive symptoms are really through the roof. They're as high as I've seen it in my entire career, with both with high school and with college students. And it's unfortunate, but in my area here in Connecticut, in the last 2 weeks, I've come across 4 different scenarios where individuals have taken their own lives, and it's tragic. It's so sad, and there's such a ripple effect that occurs. I've had students of mine tell me about another student that they don't know too well, but they're a contemporary of, and they hear these stories, and I think it's triggering. I think it is really disturbing, for young people, and that doesn't just go away after a week or two. I think as adults we think, oh, they're back, they're settled, they're in their routine, but it's a big issue, and it's a big issue as far as I can tell in most communities that have been touched by this. So I really appreciate so deeply what you guys are doing, and my guess is, Greg, there's a lot of schools out there and a lot of parents out there that would want to get in touch. How do they do that? How do they get in touch with Hope Squad?
Yeah, good question. So the easiest way is to go to our website, hopesquad.com. And
Okay.
then there's a big button right on hopesquad.com in order to connect. And we ask for just a little bit of information, including your name and email, in order for us to be able to reach back out and start that conversation about what it looks like.
Yeah.
Mark, I do want to hit on, you read a little bit of my background, and maybe it's
Yeah.
my stats degree that pulls at me, but I do want to hit on something. The CDC does a regular youth behavior risk survey. And just want to point out from last year's results from 2023, the same news and trends that you're talking about that perhaps put this in stark numbers for our listeners out there and what we talked to. So the youth behavior risk survey from the CDC said that 40% of high school kids reported feeling persistent sadness or hopelessness. 40%. And then their number is actually 10% of kids attempted suicide.
Wow.
And so look at a classroom of 30 kids, it's 3 kids.
Wow.
3 kids that in any given classroom across the United States had attempted to die by suicide. And so those are the numbers that, as you talk about, that in almost any age group from youth, that it's one of the leading causes of death, that suicide is now today. And that these are the numbers that we're dealing with as communities, as families, as parents, that we have to grapple with on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, Greg, I'm 51, as a parent, in my age bracket, I think that I would guess a lot of parents, think this, that's not happening in our town or in our community. And yet, it is. There's statistics to prove it. There's examples to prove it, unfortunately. I guess I wonder, what are your thoughts when you hear a parent respond in the manner of, this could never happen here?
It's a tough conversation, Mark, for the times that we talk with parents and families, for those that have lost a child to suicide or a family member to suicide. And the truth of it is that a lot of the time we'll hear from parents that I just couldn't believe that it was happening to us, right? And I think in any tragic part of our life, that when that moment, which can be avoided in many cases, comes to us, that we often don't know what to do, right? And it's that side of us that's saying, I just can't believe that this could happen to us. So being perhaps the data nerd that I am, looking at this maybe from that side would be an attempt to say that it does happen in every society, and it does happen in every community across the United States. And so being blind to it perhaps isn't going to make the problem go away. Not being able to talk about it, one of the reasons I love the name of your podcast is that we're doing exactly that. We're normalizing the conversation around mental health. And so the CDC reported data is something that I hope we can attempt to not ignore, right? The goal for me is the reason we talk about it and plaster it everywhere is that so we can start the conversation around this data exists, these kids, because at the end of the day, it's 3 kids, right? So 3 kids that I care about more than the data of 3 out of 10, 1 out of 10 or the 3 out of 30 in his classroom. What I really care about is those 3 kids and what are they feeling? And do they have a friend to go to talk to, right? Do they have someone to talk to? And making sure that we are, as Hope Squad, what we really want to do is try and empower those kids, those schools, those communities in order to have those conversations. And then when and as needed, when appropriate, that they're elevating that to the likes of therapists and psychologists across the country, right? But the system as a whole, we know struggles in terms of having the resources to meet the needs, and not every clinical approach is going to help. And so often what we're trying to do is at that grassroots level of having a peer sit down next to somebody and talk, right? And have the conversation and reach out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important. It's interesting. I've been doing what I do for a while now, and the podcast is fairly new to me this past year. And I really enjoy learning from people and getting a different point of view from people. And one of the things that I noticed in one of my recent interviews, we were talking about, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the show A Million Little Things. One of my favorites. I was talking to the executive producer, and he had asked me a question around what resonated with me. And it got me thinking about, there's a scene in the first show when an individual was in the middle of trying to kill themselves. He literally had a mouthful of pills, and something tragic happened to a friend at the same time, and he spit them out. But what got me about that scene was, for several episodes, he never told anybody, and here he is. He's like literally looking to end his life, and he's holding this secret. And I can't begin to tell you how many young people have come into my office over the years and told me something similar. And then when I ask them the question, who knows about this? The answer is always the same. You're the only person. So I want parents to understand from this conversation, Greg, as much as possible, there is a secretive nature to all of this. And kids, even if they haven't told you they're struggling, they very well might be. The statistics show that many kids do. I think it becomes really, really important to try to figure out a way to access those conversations. And I think your organization through peers really does a great job of making that happen. I guess I wanted to shift and ask you, a little bit about the why. Like, why are these numbers so off the charts? Why are they so extreme? And in your opinion, why have they gone in that direction in the last couple of years?
Well, I'm no social scientist, and so why is a tough answer for uh, causation. And perhaps I'll just speak a little bit from correlation. And I don't know the full reason of the why, and I'm sure it's multifaceted. I'm absolutely positive of that fact. But I do think that as we continue to live our lives around cell phones and away from the connection that we used to get, that helps drive perhaps feelings of isolation, right? We've never been more connected in a digital space, and we've never been more unconnected in a friendship, in a relationship, in a tangible way. And so I think that's part of it. It's one that's concerning to me. I have little kids, and as I think about Jonathan Hates, the anxious generation, and the way that I want to try and approach my kids growing up with their access to social media, for example, not saying that the internet or that cell phones are bad, but that what's the way that we use them, and the tools and the way that we use them. Are we protecting our kids too much from the physical world and not enough from the digital world? And how do we have a healthy balance from that? So as parents, I think we have the opportunity to look around and make sure that our kids getting the connection that they need in those ages that we just talked about, from middle school and high school, the end of elementary. They're really hardwired to look to their peers for that connection. And so what is the way that they're getting the connection? What is the way that we as parents are fostering that connection for these kids?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very well said. There's definitely been, certainly this past year, a lot more on the principal level restriction of phone during the day, middle schools and high schools, which I think is great. I've seen many more kids with their heads up, walking in hallways and walking on campuses this year, maybe than I have in the last many years as a result of that. And that's not to be underestimated. I think that connection, that ability to have conversation, to me, as you mentioned, it really has a direct impact on the isolation, many kids have felt over the years. So really important for parents to understand that impact. I always say social media is kind of like having a swimming pool. It can be a lot of fun, but you have to respect the hazard side as well. And,
It's a good analogy.
there clearly is a hazard side, right? So yeah, so I think it's, there's a lot of things out there, and honestly, Normalize It Forward, for me became, something I wanted to develop mostly because of these types of conversations. I feel like can help parents parent their kids, help them understand, hey, there isn't a playbook here, but there are plenty of resources out there. And Greg, you being one of them and your organization being one of them, to help guide, a sense of, hey, you may not have a lot of contact with depression or anxiety or suicide, but just know it's out there, and just know that even if your kids aren't struggling, they're around people that are struggling, and I think that can have an impact as well.
Yeah, for sure. Great point. The comment on that I'll make is, you're right. Some of those kids are going to be the ones that get nominated to a Hope Squad, and they're the ones that are the resource that other kids come to, right? One of the reasons we say that Hope Squad works so well in any community, in any environment, is that it's not the adults who are choosing the Hope Squad members, it's the peers. And so it's meant to be reflective of your community. And so where one community perhaps has more kids that participate in band or drama and another community, right? So it's meant to be reflective of the community that it's in. And so having a voice, that band student, that football player, whatever it is, that gets nominated to the Hope Squad because they're a good listener. They're the ones that then sit all year long with a trained advisor, and they're working on what's the content, what are the warning signs and risk factors of suicide, and then, hey, how do I do a better job of recognizing disconnection? How do I practice reaching out to somebody? How do I overcome my own fear, put down my own phone, and reach out to somebody that I haven't seen for a couple of days, or that looks maybe a little bit different than they normally do, and ask a question, right? And make a connection.
I think it's so fantastic. I mean, just the way in which you guys created this, the going at it from a kid's perspective and really understanding, because I was thinking as you were talking of kind of the social hierarchy that a lot of schools have, and there are a lot of peer opportunities in schools, but this kind of cuts through all of that. And in a way of, everybody's available to do this. It's really, it's not so much about a need, it's more about a want, and which of you kids want to participate and want to learn these skills and grow and feel like you're helping, feel like you're assisting in some way, which I think, to be honest, Greg, most kids need. Because, when I say to kids nowadays, have you known somebody? Have you known somebody who's either taken their life or tried to take their life? They absolutely do. Most kids have a list, of kids. And so they're living amongst that. They're living in this world. And I think it makes being a kid really hard, in some ways. And then flip it back to us as parents, it makes parenting those kids, I think, challenging as well. So let me ask you a little bit more about that, about parenting, because I think, you touched on social media, and there's so much, I think, around what, kind of do's and don't do's, if you will, of parenting, and what we ought to be looking at versus what some parents really are looking at. I guess I'm wondering, your organization must have a decent amount of contact with parents. What sorts of kind of do you tend to get lots of support from parents, or lots of parents sort of not supporting, or what kind of feedback do you typically get from the parenting point of view?
Yeah, so first off, I'll say that to be a Hope Squad member, you have to have a signed parent permission
Okay.
form. So
Yep.
any Hope Squad member the entire country every single year has to return a signed parent permission slip. So that's just the bar, right?
Yep.
So at a minimum, parents are aware of, accept, and encourage and are allowing their child to participate in Hope Squad. So that's number one. Number two, it's amazing the positive impact we get from parents. Once parents understand what we're trying to do and the positive impact that it makes on their child and then the school community, we have such a positive response from parents. So parents, they go to our website now, they'll see a video from a lady who is a Hope Squad mom and considers herself a Hope Squad mom. She starts out the video and she says some parents are parents of band kids and some parents are, sports parents. Well, we're a Hope Squad family. We're Hope Squad parents. And so their
Nice.
kids all independently got nominated to be a part of Hope Squad. And she said it was just a culture that they fostered within their home of making sure that their kids were reaching out and being aware of other kids. And I think as she talks about that video, that is reflective of the majority of parents out there in response to their interaction with Hope Squad. And, one thing we'll notice is as Hope Squad members grow up and they graduate high school and they move on to other parts, we'll have them reaching out to us in later years in college and thereafter. And you see that that influence extends far beyond school. And I'm sure those parents in the same exact way are appreciative of the way that Hope Squad is interacting, is providing benefit mental health awareness, right? At the very least to these kids long term.
I love that. I love that. That's fantastic. I mean, what a great culture to lay down, for kids and the impact of that. Honestly, you guys may not even necessarily know or hear about, but my guess is it really develops exponentially in some ways in the future. That's
Yeah, we hope
fantastic.
so.
Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you about one other question, Greg. When it comes to sort of next steps, because I'm, as a therapist, I see a lot of high school kids late in high school transitioning to college, and I guess I'm wondering your perspective on mental health, just in general, and wellness of that population of kids.
Through the transition from high school to college.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that it's perhaps more pronounced, but almost no different than that change we see from, especially if they change campuses, right? That a kid going from elementary school to middle school or middle school to high school, that there's a lot of that big change that happens. And what I'm hoping is that kids who participate in Hope Squad or other great groups out there in a similar way are becoming aware, self-aware of their own emotions so that they can take those moments to pause. When I was in school, we certainly didn't talk about self-care and we certainly didn't talk about mental and emotional awareness to the degree that I think we do today. And so what I appreciate, what I would really think about with these kids is making sure that they are being able to articulate their feelings, right? Brene Brown's book just came out, I think, with the 83 or 85 different emotions. Whew, right? It takes me looking at those on a page in order to be able to articulate what those are, but having the opportunity as someone graduating from high school and going to college, and that perhaps fear and anxiety as you set yourself up in a new dorm room for the very first time. As parents, we look on that and we think this is a great opportunity and look at all the great memories that I have. And sometimes we perhaps forget the anxiety that we had ourselves on that first day, sitting and then settling in a new dorm room with new roommates, etc. And so helping to, again, the name of your podcast, just really normalizing the feelings that they're having so that they can understand, okay, having this feelings don't own me, don't control me. I get to decide what I do, but I'm going to recognize this feeling for what it is. And in this moment, perhaps a little fear, it's perhaps a little anxiety, it's whatever it is, so that we can talk through it.
God, there's so many great points there. And I want to pull one out, Greg. I think at the very least, one of the things your organization does and does well is helping kids understand their emotions. And, as you mentioned, feeling an emotion is one thing, acting on it is another. We all have felt fear. We all have felt frustration and stress and anxiety and all of those things. Sometimes, kids will be paralyzed by those feelings. Others will see them coming and be able to take steps to shift away from it. But, at the very least, we need to be aware. We need to be aware and know that it's there and recognize that, those are things that can really have a major impact on us. So I really at the very least, I really appreciate that thrust of what your organization does, because I think that in many ways, the solution to helping reduce so many of these numbers and these statistics starts with this. It starts with that awareness.
Mark, and that's really why we also operate in elementary schools with that primary purpose of really trying to teach around that awareness of emotion. What a better time to help kids. I have a 5-year-old, to help them understand and then ask, right? That when they're in a moment when they need to ask for help, they're recognizing their own feelings, and either they need a moment in the quiet corner, or they need to ask for help with an emotion. What better time for someone to learn than in elementary school before they're getting to middle school or high school, and they haven't developed those skills. They don't know when to ask for help. And so they are reaching for other things, cutting in something else that perhaps is the less productive form of that, also asking for help, reaching out for help, right? And so one of our main focus and goals is really trying to reach more kids in the elementary space for exactly this reason, so that as they grow up, they're participating, they're normalizing that conversation around mental health and mental well-being in the elementary level as they grow up in middle school and high school, and then it becomes part of the culture, it becomes part of the conversation.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, it's brilliant. It's that's the way it needs to happen, and I think as it's done early that way, it just becomes a normal part of what kids do versus, this is something new and different. So I think it's a brilliant move on your behalf, and to me, the earlier the better. Honestly, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So, Greg, let me ask. So the way the podcast is set up is I generally will ask for people to nominate a friend, a coworker, a relative. Emma Benoit was so kind to nominate yourself, and that's really the way we're able to keep the conversation moving forward. So let me ask and put you on the spot for a minute. Is there anyone you'd like to nominate? Anyone in your world?
I do. Before I do that, I just give a shout out to Emma Benoit just for the gracious offer that she gave of nominating me, and working for the organization that I do, where nominations mean so much. Really grateful for Emma. She is such an inspiration. Worked with her for probably around a year, but I got to meet her for the first time just a few months ago in Mississippi, and I'm really grateful for all that she does and the way that she does it. Even more than what she does, the way that she does it. And I'm really grateful for the example she is.
Just amazing. If I can interrupt for one moment, Greg. First of all, I apologize. I'm going to mispronounce your last name. And I've known her for a couple of years now myself. And she's one of our other podcasts that I've done an interview with her already. She was amazing. And in many ways, a role model for young adults, and for them to really look at, there is opportunity here for change. And she is a change agent. I really feel like she's a pioneer as a young adult, laying the groundwork for the future for so many different young people. So back to you, Greg.
Well, to be clear, it's also not just young adults. I aspire to be like Emma. So if I can grow up and be a lot more like Emma, I think I'll have succeeded in a lot of ways.
Well said.
Well, let me do a shout out. Spent some time thinking about this, mostly because of Emma's nomination. And there's a really great organization out of South Dakota that's called Helpline Center. And the CEO of the Helpline Center is Janet Kiddums.
Right.
And really want to give a shout out to Janet, to her organization, for the way in which they run 988 inside of South Dakota, and also for the way in which they help support Hope Squads throughout the state. And she and her organization are doing not just the saying, but they're actually the doing as well, and really helping normalizing the conversation of mental health and mental well-being, and supporting Hope Squads in the process.
I really appreciate it, Greg. I mean, as they say, it takes a village, right? And, it sounds like she's doing some amazing work. For those of you that don't know, 988 is a national suicide hotline available for individuals to contact if you are having thoughts and need support. So I look forward to reaching out and connecting with her, Janet. Greg, thank you so much for your time and all of what you do at Hope Squad. Your organization really seems amazing, and I look forward to continuing to stay connected and continuing to work with young adults and assist them. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
Have a great day. Take care.
That's all for this episode of Normalize It Forward. May this conversation serve as a reminder that you are never alone in facing your mental health struggles. There are always people who can help. To dive even deeper into our journey of normalizing one of the biggest issues young people face, check out more episodes of the show at youareheard.com. It's UAREHEARD.com. Continue gaining access to the right tools, the best resources, and the most insightful advice to achieve positivity, mindfulness, and genuine happiness.